Hey people, my name is Gabriel Baldovin, and this is the third video response to the movie-like documentary Leaving Neverland. As I already said in the previous two videos, if you don't understand my pronunciation or my logic, then just go to the my left, your right, right button and enable the first the subtitle, then choose from the settings the proper language. I'm gonna put an English subtitle and also a Romanian subtitle. Sorry for making some mistakes in pronunciation. Like I said, I'm not a native English speaker, and I have to focus, to double focus on the ideas that I'm going to say and also on my pronunciation. That's why I think about the 50 minutes I'm going to take a break, because it's pretty demanding and I have to rest, and then I'll start again. Okay, now these videos that I'm making are meant to show to the other people the other side of the story, you know, because both of Wade Robson and James Safechuck, you know, I think they lied for several interests, you know. Anyway, we don't know that for sure yet, and like I previously said in the other two videos, I take into consideration that they might have also said the truth, you know, and that Michael Jackson was guilty and did all things, which like I said many times already, I don't believe. But I'll take this option into consideration, and I'll talk about in the fourth video. In the first one, I exposed the short lies that these people have said. The second one, the previous one, was focused on the psychopathological errors and very improbable symptoms these two men claim they have. If you want a more detailed summary than these sentences that I've just said, then check my first video on this subject, and you'll have somehow a 10 and 40 minutes of a more detailed summary. All right. Now, as I promised in the first video, I'll put a diagnosis based on what I have here, my notes, of what I think both of them might have suffered from back then. And as you can see, it looks like they suffer from even today. But first, let me say something on the psychoanalytical concept of object of love. It is one of the major concepts in psychoanalysis, and it refers to losing someone or something that the child is very attached to. You know, basically, this object of love is usually the mother, but the child gradually loses his mind object of love by growing up, and this is a natural fact that happens to every one of us. Apart from other major traumas that might come after, this is the toughest emotional wound that we ever endure, apart from other traumas, of course, if we're normal, if we don't have such, if we have a normal life, like I said. And that wound haunts us throughout our entire life, even if we don't perceive it. The other relationships repeat the relationship that we had with our biological or stepmother, because this is an emotional bond, not necessarily a biological bond. And basically, our mind desperately tries to hide it, but eventually it will come out modified as psychopathological symptoms. Some are severe, but others are less severe. And psychoanalytical cure specifically turns into these 2 or 3 years old age to find there the painful moments. The cure, the psychoanalytical cure, means uncovering it from the unconsciousness to the consciousness. This is what Freud said, at least. But most of the psychoanalysts believe this is the real fact that happens. So in the common people's mentality, the issue is not important, but that is because we, as a common people, try to hide it into the darkness, deepness of the unconsciousness. The social engineer constantly are traumatizing us by such a luring into false object of love, like promises, so to exploit us. The show business basically uses, and the star comes into the town, go to the local station interviews, meet with people, have its show, and then goes away, letting people are broken, in love with that star. That is what Michael Jackson really did too, as part of this show business industry, and that is what I think he truly emotionally abused without knowing those children. He didn't actually mean it, because like I'm going to say it right now based on the notes that I have here, people don't know about it, and he actually did it automatically without realizing. He was it was this third guy, I don't remember his name right now, that accused him of sexual abuse, and I remember him in an interview replying to why he testified against Michael Jackson. He said something, because he didn't call like he used to do. And when Michael Jackson was involved in all kinds of activities like composing, recording, shooting videos, you name it, he kind of abandoned people around him. And that was quite traumatic for them. And right now, I'm going to quote from the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the most used mental disorders treaty, edited by the American Psychiatric Association, the edition number 5. And I'm going to quote the criteria of a mental disorder that is called separation anxiety disorder at the page 192. And here I'm quoting: when separated from major attachment figures, children with separation anxiety disorder might exhibit social withdrawal, apathy, sadness, or difficulty concerning the work or play. Depending on their age, individuals might have fears of animals, monsters, the dark, muggers, buggers, kidnappers, car accidents, plane travel, and other situations that are perceived are presenting danger to the family or themselves. Some individuals become homesick and uncomfortable to the point of misery when away from home. Separation anxiety disorder in children might lead to school refusal. Remember that, school refusal. Because, you know, in the first video, I've been talking about that presumptive accusation, fact that Michael Jackson would say to James Safechuck that he should abandon school. So let's get back to the text. Okay, to school refusal, which in turn may lead to academic difficulties and social isolation. When extremely upset at the prospect of separation, children might show anger or occasionally aggression to someone who is forcing separation. When alone, especially in the evening or the dark, young children might report unusual perceptual experience. For example, seeing people peering into their room, frightening creatures reaching for them, feeling eyes straight at them. Children with this disorder may be described as demanding, intrusive, and in need of constant attention, and as adults may appear dependent and overprotective. The individual's excessive demands often became a source of frustration for family members, leading to resentment and conflict in the family. End quoting. Well, that's what I think both Wade Robson and particularly James Safechuck probably used to have at that time when they were close to Michael Jackson. Of course, I don't have enough data for diagnosis right now, but this is where I think they might be included under the available data in the future. I mean, if we have another data. But right now, for what we have, this is the best diagnosis, I think, that they can be included into. It is common for children, but also it is found teenagers and also in adults. And here let's focus on what I say. And I have here the notes. The first hour, 25 minutes and 5 seconds of the first part, James Safechuck says how much he loved Michael. You know, and also Wade Robson said at the minute 58 of the second part that in 2003 he loved Michael Jackson, so much, and he continued on how much he still loved Michael Jackson even after several years that they were not communicating much. And let's go further. At the first hour, 52 minutes and 4 seconds of the first part, Wade Robson talks about the jealousy he was trapped into when saw how his position in Michael Jackson's life was taken by Macaulay Culkin. His mother confirmed that, and how hurt he was in the first part at the first hour, 52 minutes and 20 seconds. And also at the first hour, 38 minutes and 30 seconds of the second part, he desperately talks on how the whole story of him moving to Australia and to America was falling apart. He was very emotional during that statement. Of course, we remember that that came after not getting job of the show, this Cirque du Soleil show that Michael Jackson family organized, and stuff. And something like this happened to James Safechuck also. He speaks about losing the favorite place in Michael Jackson's life to Jordan Chandler. At the first hour, 56 minutes of the first part. Let's notice that the jealousy that James Safechuck remembered from that period was very, very big. He was so hurt that he talked about the crying on and on, like his mother says about the 23 minutes and 40 seconds of the second part. And he keeps talking on how he felt, and the whole family felt like being dumped when Michael Jackson married with Liza Marie Presley and didn't hang out with them so often like he used to do. Now, DSM5 says at the page 191 that, and I'm quoting here, the fear, anxiety, or avoidance is persisting, lasting at least 4 weeks in children and adolescents, and typically 6 months or more in adults. Well, it's true that Michael Jackson was a highly seducer person, and as he kept leaving them for work, they could have this separation wound until today. Well, that's what I think made both James Safechuck and Wade Robson to be so revengeful nowadays on Michael Jackson, and that's why I think they could have lied against him, that he sexually abused them. That's a very good reason for that. But I'll get back to this idea in several moments. Right now I want to make a little break into this story for a different subject that is very important to me. However, you know, the pickup artists that the feminists complain about, they really produce wounds. You know, the men are somehow educated in the spirit of animal male. You know, we feel good to move from a sexual and emotional relationship to another. We have that our very basic. We have these tendencies in our basic sexual instinct, but the fact is that produces pain into abandoned woman's heart, and she's firstly seduced and then gets too attached to a man, and then he leaves and breaks her apart. I'm sorry, I have to say that I did such thing in the past to several girls without realizing, you know, and now I regret that very, very much, and I'm sorry for making them suffer. So if they see this video, I want to apologize to them. Unfortunately, this painful trick is shamelessly used by some companies to exploit employees. You know, when they first are hired, you know, they are shown respect and they are paid a high wage, and after the period, as they attach to the colleagues and to the place and to the situation, things start to change. You know, things become tough. They struggle to keep up as the task that the bosses give them become more and more difficult. I experienced that when I was working in the private sector, and actually the money remains the same, and that's the bad thing, because of the initial attachment, people can so easily quit their job, and thus they are exploited. You know, and things like that are done by government themselves, due to the low birth rate that the Western countries have. They have to import young and healthy population from the poor ones. You know, Donald Trump deceivingly plays the Mexican border wall scam policy, but in fact the USA needs hardworking people to sustain you know, their economy. So this is a very, very tricky trap here, you know. So I have to make some kind of appeal here to Mexicans, East Europeans, and Syrians, and Chinese, and whatever. Stay home. Stay home, people. Stay with your families. A higher way of living won't cure your deep emotional problems. And this is a truth that it's working for everybody, not only for immigrants, you know. On the contrary, your problems are likely to get worse by that. Don't play their cruel, heartless game. Don't abandon your children and families. That is a trap. You know? And you'll get more emotional problems after this migration experience. For more information on the subject, check out my English translated article, Migration and Its Social Issues. And now, sorry about this subject changing, but it is highly important to me. I think it's one of the most important things that I'm concerned right now. Okay, now people, let's get back to the seduction that enslaves people, you know. And Michael Jackson was part of all this without realizing, being a part of show industry, you know, and that's a fact. But we can't blame him for this, you know. He didn't know about this disorder that is creating. And I didn't know myself until I argued with a feminist on this issue, you know. Although I read about it in DSM a long time ago. But after this argument, I put things together, and I remember this disorder that this DSM explicitly named it, apart from the psychoanalytical maternal complex that I knew even before that, you know. And I realized that the feminist was actually right. There's a big frustration in living. I don't think we can blame Michael Jackson for this still. It was his job from 9 years old, and that's what the show business is all about, you know. And I think we better blame this in commercials and also in all the consumerist culture than Michael Jackson. This is my opinion. This is nowadays society's problem that can be put on Michael Jackson's shoulders. He was a son of his era, you know. He tried to be better than the society, and he was for sure, but you know, he couldn't solve all the society's problems. And now we go into another section of this video. As I previously promised, I'm going to name here several reasons that both of these two men had for potentially lying about Michael Jackson, especially Wade Robson. You know, he looks like a liar from a mile away. And the first reason is exactly this separation anxiety disorder that I just mentioned. And like I said, people don't take it seriously. Probably they both complain about being emotional hurt to someone, maybe to their mothers, and maybe to the entourages, even to TV station producers. You know, but without knowing it, people ignore them and ask them if Michael Jackson did something to them. I mean, sexually abuse them. Because this is the pattern right now, you see. Probably they first denied, but weren't able to convince others of how really painful that separation from Michael Jackson was. And then they might have come with this personal paranoid interpretation that Michael Jackson did this on purpose. You know, he was assumed as wanting to make them suffer and then seduce them, only for getting them into bed and have inappropriate sexual behavior towards them, even if they wouldn't have experienced that, you know. And then they say what they said, you know. And the second interest for lying is the one that everyone is talking about. You know, this is the Wade Robson revenge for not being called for the Cirque du Soleil show that Michael Jackson staff and family organized in 2013. Well, I've already mentioned that in the beginning of the first video about this lie, about the anxiety, depression that he said that he had, and he had to go away from the show. But like I said, these symptoms actually came after he was not accepted or fired from. Well, that's how he came with this revengeful allegation out of anger, you know, and makes sense to me. But I have another one, another interest for such possible false testimony is the envy on Jordan Chandler. I mean, money too. He won 20 millions for only 1 year for just saying Michael Jackson sexually abused them, and both they only won million or less for sustaining Michael Jackson and struggling with a fair career, you know, working hard. Let's face it, that it doesn't look fair in their world. It's not fair anyway, however. And the revenge could also come out frustration, not making to where Michael Jackson promised them to be as adults. So in the first hour, 28 minutes and 30 seconds of the first part, Wade Robson says how Michael Jackson promised him a movie director, great career. That's what also happened to James Safechuck. He also was involved in a movie directing, and after failing in this field and also in the music field, or you know, other fields to become a superstar like he was promised, now it's time for blaming Michael Jackson for too high expectations. And like I said, nobody will pay attention to this, you know. So I think because of that, now both of them actually try to make as big damage as possible, you know, to Michael Jackson legacy with this kind of allegations. And let's go further. Another possible reason for these would be the problems in marriage that they both said they had. So James Safechuck's wife speaks about this clearly at the first hour, 47 minutes and 46 seconds of the second part. One or two of them might have unusual sexual preferences that confuse their wives. As usual, this is a problem in our nowadays society. That would have been much easier for them to blame Michael Jackson for. You know, after making that statement, their wife could be more understanding towards the strange behavior they might have had. You know. And another interest for such possible false testimonies could be the relationship Wade Robson has with his wife and his child. And here's a very important fact. The first hour, 39 minutes and 10 seconds of the second part, she talks on how she asked him at one particular time if he was confused about the love that he feels for their son. There are other things might have been involved between them, you know, that could spread doubts into Wade Robson's wife, and he simply could get away with this blaming Michael Jackson for abusing him. You know, that's also a possible scenario. And let's go further. At the first hour, 29 minutes of the second part, James Safechuck talks about his kid that get close to the age when he met Michael Jackson, and he described the same thing was described by Wade Robson at the first hour and 30 minutes of the second part. When he said he was watching his little boy, and he had this obsession of Michael doing to his boy what he supposedly did to him when he was a child. You know. Now I make another turning subject with this obsession, meaning I'm kind of irritated when I hear people using this word in a wrong way, you know, and generally when they use wrong psychopathological terminology. Sorry, but I have to make this little explanation break here. It's not people's fault, as the social system would have should have told them before. I think the psychopathology should have been should be studied studying in school, you know, and people all over the world use this word obsession without understanding it enough. You know, it is usually mistaken for a spatial attraction to a powerful desire to something. Like, you know, people say, you know, teenager boys are sexually obsessed, you know, because they're very attracted to sexual issues, you know. And the notion of obsession in this sentence is too wide, you know. For this meaning, we also have the term impulse or drive, you know. Well, the obsessions are those impulses that are also rejected by the person logic or voluntary behavior, the consciousness in general. They don't cease after instinctual satisfaction, as the rest of impulsions are, you know, and the obsessions are mainly involuntarily done, and they continue on and on soon after being satisfied. Soon after being satisfied, you know, because the instinct stops much longer after being satisfied. You know, sorry about that deviation, but I have to make it. Okay. And now let's go to the mind subject again. So I'm pretty sure that Wade Robson lied about that obsessive compulsion idea of Michael Jackson having sex with his son. Michael Jackson was dead, actually. You know, in fact, that was literally impossible to come back from the dead. Well, that's where these movie-like documentary producers and Wade Robson fails, because they don't know details. They don't know that obsessive compulsive ideas involve only possible situations, not the impossible ones. You know, and in this case, the impossible situation would make the obsession to turn into a delusion or a hallucination. You know, we can have delusions, most of us, when the mental perception that we have is based on not enough perceived reality, you know, wrongly perceived. We have hallucinations, some of them. Some of people have such thing. When the mental perception is completely non-real, you know, we perceive it as real, like in dreams, but this is not real, and everybody confirms it. You know, we, like I said, we all have delusions. Sometimes when we are close to sleeping, almost dreaming, but not exactly dreaming. And during the night, outside in the nature, a bush might look like an animal waiting to kill us. When there's no enough light to see the bush, you know. But actually, we have the delusions in two cases: either when, like we see, when we're tired and our senses don't actually work properly, and two, when the reality is not very good perceived, like in the night, you see. And that was not the Wade Robson's case. He was in the midday, as he says. Besides, what kind of thriller situation was possible so that something would look like Michael Jackson coming from the dead to molest this kid? You know, it doesn't make sense. And nothing would look like him, as he was, you know, a very distinctive person, a very distinctive side. So to be talking like an animal in the night, you know, doesn't make sense. On the other hand, such kind of hallucination of Michael Jackson coming from the dead and having molesting his son would only be possible by a psychotic person, which I'm positive he was not. He could have a nightmare about it, but he said that he was during the midday. He could also have been influenced by a drug, but still, I don't think his wife would have left her son with him in such condition at the moment. So I think Wade Robson lies again here. And actually, his obsessive compulsion idea was not involved Michael Jackson, but his own person, you know. Yeah, I think he had this obsessive compulsive urge to molest his kid. And still, this is not a big deal as long as it remains in the head and not put into the practice. You know, many people have such strange impulses. That sounds outrageous, like the Oedipus Complex itself. You know, the Oedipus Complex is a basic concept in psychoanalysis, and for those who never heard of it, I'll make a short description. Well, Oedipus was a character in the Greek mythology that he was predicting when he was born to kill his father and marry his own mother. When heard that prediction, his parents decided to send him away. But you know the story, the shepherd, there was a shepherd who saved this little boy, raised him, and after many years he really fulfilled the prophecy, and he killed his dad and married his mother. Well, all the children have this unconscious idea of killing one parent and marrying the other one. Sometimes it's the mother, but other times there's the father who change place, you know, with the mother. And this complex is very mobile, you know, for sure. Wade Robson has a very active Oedipus complex as we speak right now. And from the first hour and 44 minutes of the second part, his mother complains of how he said he has no feelings for her. Well, this is a sign of Oedipus Complex denial, you know, but denial in such a very strong way, you know, not having emotion for your mother, you know. I heard he did some kind of several months therapy from time to time. Maybe he watches this video, so I'm giving him an advice, dude, go to a professional psychoanalyst and stay in therapy for at least 2 years, for at least 2 sessions a week, you know, if you want to see results. Your mother did nothing wrong, so don't blame her, and give up the hard working. You're especially predisposed for your father mental disorder. Go back and do the fun things like you probably would have been doing if never met Michael Jackson, you know. That's enough with the advice. Well, the adults suffer too from this suffer. It's a way of saying suffer, because it doesn't have only the dark side. It has also the positive side in it, and actually keeps making bondage between people. And like I said, the adults have this inverse Oedipus complex towards their own children, and some of them happen to feel consciously this urge to have sex with their own sons and daughters, you know. And as we know it, others even put into action this drive, and this is terrible, you know. And happens all kind of tragedy, incest, and the other ones perceive the anxiety about this kind of thoughts. Well, I think this is what happened to Wade Robson that day. He got scared, like everybody who's not familiar with psychoanalysis and psychopathology. He got scared, like I said, and searched for an explanation. And the easiest one is to find Michael Jackson. That could be the case in both scenarios, even if Michael Jackson, really molested him, but also in the case he didn't, which I believe it is more probable to happen. So when he felt that obsessive compulsion idea, he interpreted it as a kind of a disease that Michael Jackson infested him with it, you know. Okay, people, I just took a break and continue from here. That infestation idea is actually the common way of thinking, and I'm going to get back to this issue because most of the people are not familiar with these scientific and therapeutic facts of psychoanalysis, and you know, this is the way that actually this movie-like documentary tries to exploit people's lack of knowledge and information about this psych field. You know, people are used with this opera-like way of describing someone's mind, and a lot of people actually believe that Michael Jackson is guilty without having proper facts, out of this reality of the human mind that terrifies people even today, due to their own reverse Oedipus complex. Many see dangers around their kids, danger and existing dangers, I mean, and they end up by being overprotective towards them, and that turns later when the kids grow up into an adults, they turn into dependent persons. And there are, of course, some dangers if children are left alone in the public space, you know. This is true. But now staying in a constant alert and suspecting everybody could be more psychogenic than the actual traumas. And others are very scared of this kind of Oedipus complex about how they feel it in their own mind, and they don't show any love to their children, not at all. And you know, they are scared that they might lose control and do inappropriate things to them, you know. So this is what we are. I think so. These are the main reasons that both Wade Robson and James Safechuck could have for testifying what they said in these years. Now, turning back a little bit to the mothers, I think they both did what today's mother would do. I mean, they try to give their kids the best start in life in a secure place, because, like I said, Michael Jackson offered them a secure place. They were happy, they were playing, learning, and socializing with other children. If something sexual happened, which, again, I don't believe, well, but still, if that happened, it happened because they wanted to watch kids, you know. And let me remind you that sexual activities during childhood don't necessarily involve serious of mental disorder as an adult. And that's exactly what these two men show for this moment. They're okay. They have a normal mental disorder like everybody else, you know, at least for what they see. Neither of them suffer from a severe mental disorder. And like this movie-like documentary tries to convince us. Actually, neither the producer nor Dane don't know about the severe mental disorder criteria, and the most important and more severe mental disorders that sexual molestation and sexual abusing in early life could turn into. And there's a manipulative tendency to exploit people's lack of psychopathology, like I said many times. So this is exactly why I particularly wanted to make this video. Unfortunately, there are very important figures that now are confused about Michael Jackson. They didn't know him well, but now they don't say much. And some of them were close friends to Michael Jackson, but not so close so they would know details in his life, you know. So, actually, the mind confusion comes from the general confusion concerning psychopathology. People actually are attracted to it, but like I said, it's not enough studied in school. The weirdness of mental disorder in individuals was to other sign of supernatural influence over the people in the past. And it was an evidence that the basic principles of the basic principles of religions, you know, in the past the mental disorders were fewer, and of course the society was less stressful than today's. So the psychopathology themes were always popular in culture because they first managed to describe psychological types that everybody compared and distinguished themselves from. Knowing psychopathology means actually knowing oneself, by separating from and identifying with the others, because nowadays vast majority of people was at one particular moment in life getting through a mental breakdown disorder. Now this subject is so important, and it looks like in the Western countries there's a majority who actually suffer from a certain mental disorder. And I'm not guessing here, I'm using my notes. Like you see, I took some statistics out of DSM5 and the World Health Organization reports. And based on their statements, I will try to estimate what the prevalence of mental disorder is in the general population. I took only two out of 22 categories of psychiatric disorders that are classified by the 5th edition of DSM, the last one. And the first category is the depressive disorders, and the second one is the personality disorders. Both of them contain several individual disorders. I'm not going to mention the depressive disorders, and I'm not getting into details here because the World Health Organization said that their prevalence is about 27% of the population. We already have a percent here. On the other hand, the personality disorders category contains 10 distinctive disorders. I summed up their specific individual percent, and I've got a general prevalence between 27.22% and 44.04% general population. I also don't want to enter here into many details as there's not enough time, as you can see, but I promise that in the description of this video I'll specify the calculation. So have in mind that only 2 of the 22 of the psychiatric mental disorders, general categories, are spread between 54 and 71.04% of the population, of the total population. Well, here we have to consider that some of them overlap each other. For example, the borderline or the avoidant personality disorder might develop depressive symptoms, but not all of them overlap, And so let's just say that together the two categories have a summed up prevalence about, let's say, 40% among population. However, I suspect that if we sum all the 22 categories together, we will get somewhere around, let's say, 80 to 90% of the population. So 80 to 90% suffers from a severe or less severe mental disorder. So this confirms that what actually most of us already saw, the normality became a minority. And that's easier to observe it on other people. because we are used to our own symptoms and perceive them as normal. But the truth is that is very likely to suffer ourselves from something, you know. And the truth is that unfortunately the nowadays consumerist human society is built in such a manner that we cannot be normal anymore, and we might be normal again if we specifically avoid this society and live in a traditional way of living. You know, I'm not making an apology here for traditional way of living. It has also its problems, but actually the truth is that the daily stress of nowadays modern society kills us slowly. If you protest against the society of the rulers and politicians and so on, then the law enforcement gets you and traumatizes you even more. And the wars that systematically brought traumas during centuries exist even today. So the most of us suffer. We hear in this movie-like documentary some psychopathological symptoms described by two men, like I said. I don't know if they are true or not, but if they tell the truth, that didn't necessarily come from Michael Jackson, you know. And this is what this movie-like documentary wants us to believe and to misleadingly guide us to a wrong idea, you know. That's why I think it's the education system's future task to include the psychopathology in the basic people's knowledge. It should be studied from the very young age as the language or basic math. We study the language so we correctly understand each other. So let's study the psychopathology too. And let me briefly present to you what kind of mental disorders that the sexual abuse sometimes brings. You know, I'm not going quote from DSM again, because we don't have time. You know, I'll lose another hour or so. But I'll indicate the page so you can read it for yourself. You know, and satisfied for the truth that I'm invoking here. So the sexual abuse on children could be could turn later on, when the kid grows up, into 1. Post-traumatic stress disorder at page 271 from DSM. 2. Acute stress disorder, DSM page 280. 3. Bulimia nervosa, DSM page 348. 4. Dissociative amnesia with dissociative fugue, DSM page 403. 5. Conduct disorder, DSM page 472. 6. Disruptive and impulse control, DSM page 473. 7. Antisocial personality disorder, DSM page 60 and 61. 661. 8. Borderline personality disorder, DSM page 665. 9. Dependent personality disorder, DSM page 676. And 10, we have pedophilia, this DSM page 699. And of course there's the 11th one, the last one. This is the bipolar disorder, but you know, like I said, Wade Robson is at the 10-time risk of developing such a disorder or major depressive episode due to his father heritage. I've spoke about it in the previous video, the second video of this series, because his father was a bipolar disorder from what they saying, and so if this ever happens, I wish won't happen, but if it happens, there would be not an evidence that Michael Jackson performed sexual behavior, and he could develop this disorder because of his father. For now, either one talked about the symptoms that meet the criteria for the above disorders. So we don't have such disorders here. So what do we assume here? That Michael Jackson is a master criminal? Well, they don't have such thing. When they will report such disorders like I previously just mentioned, yes, we can assume that Michael Jackson did something to them. But now we don't have such things. You know, there's no crime here. And what's the point of assuming? It's okay to assume that 9/11 was an inside job. There were major prejudices in human lives involved. You know, the Iraq War was set to freedom to give up its natural resources. But what damage do we have here? We have two young men that are joyfully living their lives. You know, I don't see otherwise. No. Do you see any substance addicted adults, or you know, out of the former Neville sleepovers? I don't see. It is, of course, Macaulay Culkin. He went through such period, but that was because of his ending actor career, or interrupted actor career. He was a major star during his early childhood, and the black period after this in his life happened because of the professional downfall that he suffered afterwards. And, let's wait and see if he will ever come out other molestation complaints. You know. Let's see if the former Neverland sleepover will ruin their lives throughout substance addiction or antisocial behavior, or other major signs of severe mental disorders. As long as there is no sign of this, for me, there's no major prejudice done. So there's nothing involved here. Why believe what this movie-like documentary says? See? And I did hear some research. Let's see what lives these two men actually are living, because you'll be surprised. Let's see what the 2016 U.S. Census Bureau report has to say about having kids and family in the United States, like these two men have. Well, it says, this report says that the number of unmarried adult people in USA, I mean, they have at least 18 years old, it's, how much do you think? 110.5 million. 110.6 million. And this means 45.2% of all US residents that are adults. After this number, there are only 7.3 million people that live as an unmarried couple. So you see, most of them are actually, they don't have a relationship. The rest of them are single. And do you know why these people are not married? Because they have their lives. They don't want their children to live the life that they are living. And what do we see when we analyze the lives of James, Safechuck, and Wade Robson? Well, they are a part of the privileged part of a privileged society. They belong to the optimistic health that decided to get married and have children. How about that? They are healthy. They are successful without any major mental disorder issues. We will see how they will evolve in the future, of course. But for now, they show no sign of severe mental disorder. Like I said, there is a risk for Wade Robson, as I pointed out earlier, due to his father's bipolar disorder, possible inheriting. But for now, they are both fine. Don't fall into sympathy towards them. Michael Jackson was actually the key to their later success, even after they clearly failed into what he wanted to do. These people are actually rich. And let's go back to more data. The celebritynetworth.com website, says that Wade Robson wealth, it's about $1 million. Wow. $1 million. Let's go further. The treilea.com website says that James Safechuck has $750,000. Maybe these websites lie. But the fact is, these guys are rich. And now what? They want some more. As every rich man. Because of what? Because Jordan Chandler won 20 millions for only 1 year. And they only won 1 million or less than that for 7 years. Well. Okay. Let's compare their living standards with the average American citizen and see how would you classify them. The US Census Bureau has reported in 2016 that the annual median person income is $31,099. Well, that's what an average person earns in the USA. After the same source, in 2017, there were 39.7 million people in poverty in the United States. So wait a minute. Michael Jackson grabs you from the bottom of society, or let's say the middle layer of society, buys your family a $100,000 house for both families, sends you to upper halves of society in a way or another, make you rich, and then boom, now you're blaming him for destroying your life. How cool is that? Jane Safechuck and Wade Robson. I'm going to ask you a question. What did you guys do for the entertainment industry or the society in general to deserve such wealth? Oh, you directed some movies that Michael Jackson paid for, huh? And guess what? No one have heard about it. I haven't. Why? Why Michael Jackson did it? So you guys can learn and become someone. What else did you do? You produced some music that also nobody heard of. I haven't. What else? You, Wade Robson, made choreography for Britney Spears. Well, was it because she was a Michael Jackson fan too? I don't know. Do you all understand that apart from all that Michael Jackson gave to them as gifts, most of their wealth came from the fact that people saw them as Michael Jackson students? Do you know that how many artists with an inestimable operas died poor, in history? I see now people blaming their mothers. That's already involving believing that this movie-like documentary has valid evidences for this. Let me remind you that it has not. It doesn't bring no evidence whatsoever. I think the mothers are decent, except for wanting more money, and that was their main mistakes from the very beginning. This opened up a very brutal social ascendance for them, Too soon happened this ascent to upper layers of society. Their low social status mentality has not adapted to the rich man world, and this is actually their problem now, and they are too greedy. They want to be richer on no factual justification. If you have an inherited formation of low social class profile for a long time, meaning several generations, and suddenly you go up very quickly to the top of the social hierarchy, then you'll experience depression. It is strange, but that's a fact. It happens also with post-traumatic stress disorder. This disorder symptoms come out not in the moment of the crisis that the individual is facing. They appears afterwards. When the situation turns back into normality, your heritage was constantly manipulated to work the hardest you can. So living in such a low social basis, it's trying to get rich, you know, and become important, and to work hard and to escape this traumatic place, you know. But after get rich, this goal become unimportant, you know. And the problem is that people perceive this getting rich as a kind of heaven from the religion. You know, you expect absolute happiness after getting there, and when you finally get there, then you see that nothing happens, no happiness come, and the wealthy social status won't be able to cover that expectation. So both of them came from such a low social layer, but now after Michael Jackson's experience and getting rich, they turn back against him with love-hate feelings. You know, the message they are now sending is something like, you should better have let us poor and happy than turn us into rich, but with no goal in our lives. In psychoanalysis, this is called the compulsion to repetition, and it refers to the sabotage that we unconsciously do on ourselves on fulfilling our plans and wishes, you know. So if we feel actually better to wait for this happiness to happen than actually happening in fact, and that is the most compulsory repeat that we sometimes that we usually do, not sometimes, you know. We repeat mistakes because of this addiction to our pitiful condition, and that unconsciously terrifies us to be successful. It's kind of strange. We trip on ourselves, you know. And I was intrigued by this amateur popular belief presented in this movie like documentary about so-called therapy telling secrets that usually soap opera exploits. This is the principle of very psychodynamic therapy. It's true. The psychoanalysis is their referring model. Freud said that whatever is revealed to conscious from the unconscious involves a kind of mental therapy. That he called abreaction, you know, in psychoanalysis. And a long time before, the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle mentioned the term catharsis. That refers to the relief or good state of mind when expressing inner emotional states. You know, the Christian religion practice included that kind of confession that gave a believer some relief and assurance that God won't punish him or her. This practice was good for those who indeed broke the law at some point in their lives. The heavy burden of their social crime into their soul can thus be released by confession. Simply confession cures in a certain level, but at this level it works only for those who carries that kind of regrets of what he did in the past. The mental disorders are not caused by such a small sins, you know. And they won't be simply cured by several hour confessions as the opera-like TV shows, you know. And that means money. She do it for money. Opera became a kind of new mass therapy goddess these years, you know. Opera did everything and everything happened to opera. If something important goes on, then must go to opera. You know. When the end of the world will come, expected to see it on opera. Joking here. But actually, their producers, these TV show producers, are not interested in soul healing, but to get rating audience from it and money, like I told you. Such an opera-like attitude, and I could see in Wade Robson. So I'm asking him again, why did you cry when you said you're totally getting over it, as you stated in 2013? Was it because of the big resolution camera that must keep your testimony to the history? Or you cry because your psychotherapy wasn't actually done at all, like you previously suggested? No. Wade Robson has some kind of not very severe mental disorder, like Jane's Safechuck too. But to presume that he was caused from Michael Jackson, no. Most of us have such things, you know. And then he does what? Then he makes this new mass amateur opera, soap opera therapy in a TV show. And here comes into the scene what James Safechuck's mother said about this secrets that kills you. At the first hour, 57 minutes of the second part. If you really suffer, I don't think you do, but if you really suffer, and you're telling the truth, just stop playing opera show in a high neighborhood, you know. Go to a good psychoanalyst, dude. You have plenty of money. Can't you afford to pay now? It's not that expensive. With that money that you have, you can have in 2, 3, or 4 years a good therapy that would change you for good. The fact is that the psychodynamic therapies, and especially the psychoanalysis, go much deeper into mental conflict that you don't know about. They are unconscious. Freud said that the origin of those internal conflicts lie back somehow at early childhood until 3 or 4 years old. Find a psychoanalyst that go to that period, dude, and stop acting like all your problems come from Michael Jackson abandon. There's a maternal complex before turns into a separation disorder. I think that they even go further to the previous generation that a person develops from. And even from the ancestral traumas, having a secret might come with a burden of guilt. That's true. But the secret is already spoken, your possible secret. I don't know how to call it anymore. You already spoke about. It is already cured. All this opera mass therapy that will cure depressive anxiety or general neurotic disorder is a misleading one. This movie-like documentary is a psychotherapeutic fraud, as opera herself. you know, and all the people who listen to this should have in mind that confessing is not enough. What does your current psychotherapist want to find in this story with Michael Jackson that you have already not spoken? That you're pregnant with him now? What do you want to have some more from this? There's nothing else to reveal out of this 7 to 40 years old loop. You know, find someone to help you go deeper into early childhood before meeting Michael Jackson, into transgenerational traumas. Unfortunately, I suspect the psychoanalysis has a new challenge now. The problem is the same for every rich individual. They want more. They don't know where to stop anymore. I'm afraid that the classical psychoanalysis can't do much in front of this new challenge. It has to cure the greed instead of repressed memory symptoms. You know. However, I still suggest both of them to take a deep breath and try a good psychoanalyst. This is the best we have as a society right now. That would be a much more interesting story to tell than this one that they're telling. Okay, guys, this was the third video, detailed response that I made for this movie-like documentary. Keep in mind that the first one dealt with lies and manipulative techniques for convincing uninformed people were not enough circumspect, with not enough critical thinking people, that Michael Jackson was guilty. And the second one was dedicated to the psychopathological mistakes and not probable symptoms that this movie-like documentary is using for making people believe Michael Jackson was guilty. And the next video I will show, like I promised, what are the chances so we are trapped in these manipulations, and also what would be the proper reaction if we ever will have a clear and undeniable evidence that Michael Jackson was guilty. I'm reminding you right now that we don't have such evidence right now. So that's about it. Please feel free to comment and react, and also share this video to as many people as you can. And please use these decent words in comments. I will delete them otherwise. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.